It's NFL Draft Week. This is Louisiana versus All Y'all's Recruit That Boot. I'm Jarrett Roser. He's Sam Spiegelman, and we're certainly looking forward to Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, seeing where an awful lot of guys that, prepped in Louisiana just a couple years ago or have played you and Tulane, where some of these guys are going to land in the NFL draft. Should be a lot of Louisiana-tied names called over that 3-day span. We'll get into that and just kind of have some fun talking about some of those guys and some memories from their prep days, as well as at least one kind of recruiting tidbit update that we'll check on before getting into that. But Sam, how we doing? I don't think you noticed when we were chatting before, but I wore a nice green and white shirt for your New York Jets. We'll see how some things go for them at number 7 in a couple of days. What's the vibes like out there in Austin for you this week?
Yeah, it's my favorite week of the year. Love the NFL draft, which is so ironic because I am a Jets fan and they find a way to squander their pick routinely. Although I was a big fan of the offensive tackle from Penn State last year. You know what? If they went offensive tackle and happened to draft someone from North Louisiana or the south side of Houston, I wouldn't be terribly upset this year.
Let's do that, because that was 100% a thing that I was going to ask. I believe, unfortunately for you and your hopes of tying together some of your love of Louisiana high school football and the Jets, as much as I know you would love for Will Campbell to slip to 7 to the Jets, I think the Patriots are ultimately going to end up taking him at 4, which sucks that much more for you, given that it's, the Patriots. But y'all have had, I say y'all, the Jets have had some hits certainly since we've known each other. A couple of years ago, Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson was a great 2022 draft, I think it was. But if Will Campbell were to end up sitting there at number 7 and the Jets are on the clock, what is that, the 5-minute span, looking like over at the Spiegelman house? And what would the excitement level for you look like if the former Neville and LSU star were to end up with your NFL franchise that you've been a fan of since a kid? Would that be the top first round that you can remember?
Yeah, I could imagine myself carrying the card up to the commissioner if I could. I would deliver that so quickly. You know what? Olu Fashanu on one side, Will Campbell on the other is absolutely dynamite. I've been a keen observer of the short arm discussion about Will Campbell, and which was certainly a polarizing topic, 4-ish years ago when we were ranking him as, the number 2 or 3 offensive tackle in the country, trying to decide whether we put a first round label on him because, truth be told, I kick myself all the time for not putting the 5-star on Will, because despite this arm length, he has been absolutely dominant from the second he arrived in Baton Rouge. And we should have known that coming in because he is the best player in Neville history, in my opinion. He was an instant impact freshman in Baton Rouge. He dominated every time he was in a camp setting. And, his competitive spirit was never questioned. So you have to love that. Not only that, I was watching some clips from him showing it off to the missus, just how smart of a young man he is as well. The character, the on the field productivity, and he's a franchise player. He's one of the few franchise players that are available in a draft each and every year. So yeah, I would sell the farm to have Will anchor the offensive line for the next 10 years. I do think he won't get past 4 to the Patriots for sure, and goes to show you that extra half inch on his arms is going to mean diddly squat, in my opinion.
I thought we'd get into the high school recruiting update before we got into some of this, but it just makes sense to stick with this now because you hit on a lot of aspects. Number one, when you said the top player in Neville history, it kind of gave me pause because that is an impressive history, obviously. But this is a guy who looks like he's about to be the highest drafted offensive lineman ever out of LSU. And so that says an awful lot. A decorated guy who's going to be the first round offensive lineman out of LSU since another pretty good former Tiger lineman in Alan Faneca in 98. And so the track record that he's had at the level that he's had has been incredible. And I feel like he came into this pre-draft lead up viewed by a lot of people as the top tackle prospect in the class. And then he goes to the combine and he has an unreal performance in terms of some of his testing numbers and what he was able to do. And yet still the biggest talking point coming out of that was, are his arms too short to stick at this position long-term that he's excelled at his entire life? And I think for folks that are frustrated about that, there's a lot of dexterity and playing percentages that goes into measurements and why certain numbers are considered the numbers and the thresholds you're trying to hit. And particularly at the NFL draft level, that much more than the college recruiting level, the amount of intel that goes into those metrics is pretty deep. But at the same time, there are outliers to any of these percentages. And so I think that's where we look at Will as saying he's been so good in so many other ways and makes up for that one criticism in so many ways that we both view him as the guy to take off the board there if you're looking for an offensive lineman in the top 10. From a recruiting standpoint, obviously, I mean, this is a conversation we get into time again, the performance versus some of the measurables and how much to factor in some of that. How do you view some of those conversations when you have a guy that maybe is a little on the shorter side or, a little bit more compact than most teams are necessarily looking for as their blueprint at a certain position, but a guy that has played really well, obviously at the high school level and had success on the camp circuit and all those things? How do you kind of factor in all of these different pieces of that puzzle?
Yeah, just to piggyback off the end of that last point before, what a fantastic ambassador Will has been for LSU off the field. And when he was considering going to the draft last year, part of the conversation was around his arm length. Was it going to reach, the 34-inch plateau, which, like you said, analytics really point to as being NFL tackle arm length. And they said because of the arm length, he's probably pretty safe to be like around the 15 to 30 picks, between picks 15 and 30 rather. So coming back to LSU, it wasn't going to hurt him. It wasn't, he was pretty much locked in to be a first rounder, but because of the arm size, maybe not going to crack that first half of the first round. And then today we are talking about his arms have not grown, yet we are talking about him being, if he's not a lock to be the first offensive lineman off the board, pretty sure of a lock to be a top 5 pick, a top 10 pick, and he came back and produced when really the scouts in the NFL didn't think that was going to be a probability, which just goes to show you the type of young man we're talking about and why he is a franchise level offensive lineman. To your second point, questioning Will, whether he was an offensive tackle, that wasn't ever the discussion. But in a lot of situations, especially now, interior offensive linemen are getting paid just as much as offensive tackles. So I think that the discrepancy is becoming lesser and less. A lot of the traits that we talk about on this podcast or in those rankings rooms is, well, he can play offensive tackle, but he can also slide in and play guard, and he could be a left tackle or he could possibly be a right tackle. So I think position versatility actually, it's a more positive branding standpoint than just saying he's a left tackle or an offensive guard. But in the camp setting, you can kind of tell, like, some of these mauling guards that you see on tape that you kind of fall in love with, they're a little bit heavy footed, so they can't get into their pass sets as quick. And the same kind of goes for some offensive tackles. These big, first off the bus kind of guys that are 6'6" and 330 pounds, but sometimes they really haven't dropped into pass sets yet, or they haven't done so against guys that are equally as imposing on the defensive line. So you have to kind of always contextualize those camps. And more importantly, does it match the tape? You don't want to ever say this guy is a camp superstar. Let's, rank him and assume he's going to be a first round pick. But if you're already, seeing some stuff pop on tape, and then what you see in a camp setting, you can process with context. I think it's very essential to the overall ranking process, which, as we see, has opened up the door for players like Will, who dominated the Under Armour and the Rivals camp settings. And the same goes for Kelvin Banks. Multiple times came to Rivals camp, was an Under Armour All-American. And both were, either flirting with or finished as 5 stars by most media services.
Let's, I guess, kind of share. Give me something when you think of Will, and particularly early on, and Will before he got to this point where he's a dude where they're giving the number 7 patch at LSU, and he's a 3-year starter, a starter as a true freshman right out the gate, and all of those things. Thinking back to his days at Neville or on the recruit trail, I'm going to mention one just to kind of get ahead of you in case it was where you were going to head. So you pivot if necessary, instead of making myself do so. But you mentioned the camp dynamic, and I remember his LSU camps and some of the battles he and Quincy were having, who are obviously Quincy Wiggins, 2 guys that we loved in that class as just, personalities away from the field, just great at that point, kids, great, huge young men, but still essentially kids. Who were just ferocious on the field. And when they had opportunities at those LSU camps to go at one another, the intensity level match it up to a point where the current LSU guys were hype watching some of those reps and the intensity that Will brought to that setting, despite knowing he was already assured his spot and he was heading to LSU and all these things. It meant something to him to win every single rep out there. And I think at one point, Quincy might have gotten the best of him on a rep, and Ali Gay was bouncing around and excited. And Will almost turned to push Ali because he didn't know who was around him before he realized what was happening. And so just I think some of that dichotomy for him of how awesome and nice of a guy to be around off the field as he can be, and so much comes from obviously his parents, who have been awesome to know through the years. And then that switch that flips where in all settings he wants to win and he is ticked off if he's not. And so you've seen that from a very early age with him, obviously, and it's just continued all the way through. But I don't know if that's where you would have headed, but I stole it if so. So give me something else.
That wasn't what I was thinking of, but I'm glad you reminded me of that. But it did kind of open the door. I just, that particular class he was a part of, him and Walker and Emery, those were just some great young men to cover. They made this job, which at times we love to complain about, just a little bit more fun. They were just, Will had to be, and I think I still stand by it, the easiest kid to ever cover. First of all, no matter what he said, it obviously came in that Monroe Southern draw, which he could recite the alphabet and it would make me laugh, 10 out of 10 times. But I remember him coming to Rivals camp, I think as a sophomore. He had just picked up the LSU offer. He visited Baton Rouge the day before. And he already had LSU as his leader. He was getting ready to go see Tuscaloosa. I know he really liked Coach Pittman up at Arkansas. He had interest in Tennessee and their history. But I remember him telling me straight up when LSU was his leader. I remember him calling me on the phone, and again, cue that fantastic Southern draw, telling me that he was ready to commit, and our mutual friend Julie was going to go up to Monroe to film it for him. Every step along the way, he was so easy to deal with. He was such a great kid, but excellent football player. And I'm happy again for the story I mentioned before. People thinking that he couldn't improve upon being a second half of the first round kid. And now we're talking about being potentially OT1 in this draft. If it was my choice, where I would hand in the card for Gang Green. But I'm super excited for Thursday for Will to, it looks like, be the first boot boy off the board.
Yeah, and we should hear a few of those guys called some, boot boys, Louisianimals, just any guys that have grown up here and we've watched play their high school ball over the course of a few days. Some for LSU, some who have gone off elsewhere and excelled at the college level. I'm really looking forward to that. Will is the guy that we know is going to be. I'd be shocked if he's not a top guy. It really seems like he's going to be a top 5 guy. Interested to see if, not a Louisiana native, but an LSU guy, Mason Taylor, has the potential to sneak into the last couple picks of the first round, potentially Thursday, but seems like a surefire second round pick if not. And then when we get into that day 2 conversation is when things start to get really interesting for Louisiana versus all y'all fans, because a guy you mentioned, Emery Jones, the former Catholic star that was the right tackle to Will's left tackle these last 3 years. He's someone that has a chance to hear his name called on Friday. I'll be out there in Lafayette with Jack Bech. And, speaking of all of these guys that we're talking about now, the families and the characters of it's incredible. And so really looking forward to spending Friday night with those folks. They've obviously been through so much this year. We talked about at the beginning of January, and even from a football standpoint, it's been a journey for Jack to finally get the late LSU opportunity, sign with LSU, have to make a tough decision to pivot and go to TCU, and then become what looks like a potential second round or third round draft pick. Those guys, Trey Amos, Trey Harris, Dylan Sampson, Savion Jones, where is he going to go? Zy Alexander, the former Laurelville standout. When you look at us getting past that first round and some of these other guys, who do you really like the potential of as potentially a steal for one of these franchises, whoever takes that swing on one of these next Louisiana guys out, and just kind of what you see from them as obviously great college players, but future pros?
Yeah, I'm super excited about Emery Jones. He was someone that I was higher on than most people coming out of Catholic. Obviously, he talked about a school that produces a ton of future talent, and I think he's the best offensive lineman in that very rich Catholic O-line history. And not only does he have a fantastic football and basketball background, he was a state power lifter. We talk about position versatility. I've always felt he was going to be playing inside and at LSU and eventually in the pros, and him playing right tackle, but also, again, that long-term ability to shift inside. He's going to be someone who plays in this league for a very long time, just continues to embody everything you want in a professional approach. Jack, of course, I think coming in, I think he has been one of the names that's been buzzing. I love all the attention that he's getting for the quality of young man. Unfortunately, the circumstances that him and the entire family have dealt with this year. But I think he's up to that moment, and he's going to honor Tiger in a big way. I think he will come off the board Friday. And what excites me is one, that they keep talking about him as a tight end, which was my mistake out of when he was in high school at STM. So I'm glad that we're still harping on my mistake and it's getting all this recognition. But I think Jack coming in is being discussed, and as we know, he's a ready to go product. He was so polished coming out of high school. We saw him be an impact freshman in Baton Rouge, and then take it and run when he got to Funky Town. He's not gonna bring top end speed. That was always the biggest question mark of his game. I remember during COVID in Lafayette, he clocked I think a 4.57 or a 4.58 40, and I was like, all right, like, let's rank you as a 4-star. You're gonna get that 40 time. He's got that 40 time down to just under 4.5. But he is so. Yeah. He is such a crafty route runner. He knows how to get open. He's open even when he's not. He's a tough competitor. We know may not have the high upside, but has a fantastically high floor. So I think if he can land with a contender, I could see him catch 50, 60 balls as a rookie this year. Those are two guys I definitely wanted to mention. There's definitely more.
Let's stick with. I was about to say, let's stick with those two for a second. Emery, I agree with you, man. I think he did an admirable job at that right tackle spot at LSU. But when I look at what his future looks like, the way I'm envisioning it unfolding is he gets picked by the right squad, kicks inside the guard, and becomes one of the best few guards in this entire class as a day 2 pick, where I think he can really excel there. Looking forward to everything for him, obviously. And then Jack, you talk about when you mentioned he doesn't have the burning top end speed of, like a Matthew Golden or some of these guys up toward the top of those metrics in this class. He's certainly a guy with enough speed to not only get himself open with his route running and whatnot, but make some plays after the catch, to stretch some things vertically in some spots. And I remember, again, taking it back to just some high school memories, these guys in Baton Rouge, Jack's STM team facing Emery's Catholic High team back in the day. Essentially the night that felt like everything fell into place, where Jack was going to have to be an LSU offer guy, where he came to Olympia and just tore up the Bears up and down those sidelines. Some of the ways that he was able to hit the sideline and be gone impressed me in some of his speed there. But I can't remember a whole lot of nights that felt as clearly of this guy probably just got the LSU offer in real time because of this 200 some odd performance against a really good defense, with, some of the eyes that are on some of those Catholic High games in Baton Rouge. And obviously that's an oversimplification of his recruiting process. A lot went into that beyond just one night, but it felt like a kind of a pivotal moment for him in kind of a crazy way. I don't know
You're
if you
talking
have
about
anything more you want to add on
Vanderbilt
those two.
verbal commitment, Jack Bech.
Yeah, it's incredible how his ascent in the recruiting process unfolded, and now to a point where I think he's probably a second round pick, certainly a day 2 pick. I think is pretty safe when we go into this thing this week. To watch this kid go from, I think it was a sophomore, I'm watching him and thinking, okay, they're not throwing a ton his way, but this kid is a really willing, nasty blocker for a young wide receiver. And then some of the things he was able to do as a pass catcher for that program over the course of his career. And Vanderbilt comes in, he, obviously great relationship there, commits to those guys. And I think a lot of people in Lafayette are wondering for a while, why has an LSU offer this kid? He's ridiculous. And finally they do. And it all kind of that way. But I think he is one of a lot of stories in this draft for Louisiana kids and families of, whether it be trusting the process and the timeline and not getting bogged down in who else is getting what offers around me, just be patient and let it happen the way it's supposed to happen for me, or just continued development and finding the right home at the college level. TCU ended up being a great move for a young man that grew up wanting more than anything to play at LSU. And so he got that opportunity, but then found his springboard to the NFL elsewhere. And you watch the development of guys like Trey Harris, a quarterback at Como High from Malik Neighbors, who goes on to Ole Miss and becomes one of the best wide receivers in the country, or Trey Amos, who signs with the Cajuns right there close to home and then has to find his way to the SEC. It's just different timelines, different storylines. The process will unfold as it has to unfold. And I think there are a lot of really cool storylines for Louisiana guys in particular in this class of how it all is coming to be.
Yeah, let's continue that theme. Barron Sorrell worked out for LSU. He did not get an offer. And after a breakthrough senior season, ended up signing with Texas, signing with Bo Davis, which I'm sure if LSU fans who are paying attention are like, well, if he was in Baton Rouge, you could bet that Barron would have also been there. And Barron just wrapped up his 4th year. He spent 4 years in Austin and was a part of the reformation of that Texas defensive line that, has had Texas knocking on the doorstep of playing in a natty the past few years. And Barron in that process, from speaking with his dad, Barron really, Barron had the Vanderbilt offer, he had the Tulane offer, but he didn't start really attracting the Power 4 SEC schools until his breakout senior season. And just to your point, the timeline is different. Sometimes, you'd love to be having that growth spurt and a dominant breakout junior season, but that's just not the process for everyone. And it's working out just fine because some team is definitely going to scoop up Barron Sorrell in day 2. And he's going to play in the NFL for a long time. He has become, again, talk about versatility, excuse me for being redundant, but super bendy and tough playing the run off the edge, but also enough juice as a pass rusher to bolt inside and give it from an interior D-line spot. Smart as a whip, played for Bo Davis and Kenny Davis in big, important SEC games. And, he's had some talent around him, but he's often been, if not the best player, at least the second best player on a really good defensive line that showed it well against Georgia and Alabama and different spurts over his time at Texas.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Barron. I forgot him, and I know we're gonna, regardless, end up forgetting somebody that has a chance to maybe get a name called late on Saturday. Barron seems like he'll be late Friday or early Saturday. I mentioned in the list Savion Jones, his development coming out of St. James, bulking up to where that guy's now 285 and long as can be and running 4.7s at Pro Day. I think his combination of length and speed is going to be really interesting for an NFL defense here, wherever he ends up landing. I mentioned Dylan Sampson, who another guy that,
Right.
overlooked by LSU largely right down the road at Dutchtown, found himself a great home at Tennessee and became a great SEC back and is now going to be a mid-round guy in a loaded running back class and make somebody's fan base really, really happy.
Leading touchdown scorer at Dutchtown still, right? All-time leading scorer?
I don't think anyone's passed that up. He had a hell of a high school career there for the Griffins, but a guy we didn't mention yet, Cameron Jackson, who was an LSU guy at one point in his class coming out of Haynesville, has had to bounce around, has had himself a hell of a college journey and ends up at Florida and then a great combine performance. And now suddenly looks like he's potentially, I think, early Saturday draftee potentially.
We have two DBs. Of course, Greedy Vance coming out of Florida State and then USC. And before that, Louisville, I think, or Arkansas. I mean, maybe even, did he sign with Arkansas too? A couple of transfers in that career.
Yeah, I think he was committed to Louisville and then signed at Arkansas, or I think it was that way, and not vice versa, and then went to Florida State, obviously, and
finished up at USC
and then USC.
Another day 3 pick that I think he has a chance to play in this league. I love how I still want to call him Jamie, but he wants to be called Greedy. It's his week. His speed turn still lives in my brain from seeing it. He was someone I really loved how he progressed over his college career and continued to expand and live up to his nickname. And then Jordan Clark, I don't know if I think he'll be a day 3 pick. We talk about the importance of the nickel position in the NFL. Jordan was doing a little bit of everything when he was out in the Valley at Arizona State, and then coming to Notre Dame and just being such a sound tackler, being so explosive, playing the nickel position, jumping in front of routes and being a physical tackler. That's exactly what NFL teams need in their secondary now, especially competitors. Obviously, he is Ryan's son. That doesn't hurt, but what he did this past year for playing in a national championship, but really just having another really great year after his run in Arizona State, I think is definitely going to help him get his name called on Saturday as well.
To clean up my mistake on Greedy, he was headed to Arkansas, signed with Louisville. So I had it backwards. He played the first 2 years at Louisville, then went to Florida State. Jordan, glad you mentioned him. It's also, if we get this posted today on Tuesday, happy birthday, Jordan. Hell of a week for Jordan Clark to have his birthday, and whether it be an NFL draft opportunity or a priority free agent there late Sunday or late Saturday, early Sunday, he's going to have an opportunity in this league. And we talk about families. It's been cool to be close to through the years. The relationship with the Clarks has been awesome. Very different football players from dad to Jordan, but it's funny just the intelligence that they both bring to the game. Jordan, as a smaller defensive back, is not shy about hitting, and so he gets some of that from Pops. But the intelligence and confidence and way they go about their business is you can kind of tell that they are related in some of the ways of how they handle some things. Other names.
I thought you were going to say that comes from mom.
Look, credit the whole family. I've had a chance to spend more time with RC through the years, but been a pleasure anytime I had a chance to see any of the Clark family. Someone I know you loved covering at the high high school level and through the recruiting process as well. Worth mentioning Patrick Jenkins, the former John Ehret star who ended up at Tulane, and now we're hoping maybe can he get a 7th round type draft selection, or where is he going to land? He's going to get an NFL opportunity somewhere. Will Shepard, a guy that we've talked about so much, Nate Shepard on this show, his older brother who went to Vanderbilt and then ended up at Colorado, had a great pro day recently with his vertical leap and his 40 time. Montrell Johnson, former De La Salle, run the damn ball running back for the
I was wearing
the
that
Cavs
shirt
down
today,
there.
man. Come on.
The Cajun signee who ends up following Coach Napier and company out to Florida and now has a chance. Again, it's a loaded running back class, and so it's going to be tough for guys like him and Josh Williams to get late draft opportunities because there is just such a glut of good running back talent. But Montrell is someone, again, to watch out for an NFL opportunity in some capacity somewhere. And again, I'm sure we're missing some folks. Major Burns is hoping for an opportunity somewhere this weekend.
The pride of Jennings.
Trevor, yeah, he's going to get drafted in that running back class for sure.
Yeah,
a guy
2,
that
day 3
was at Florida and then went to Georgia.
Listen. Travis was obviously a 1st round pick, and now people are going to look back and say, was he a quote unquote bust? That's a very circumstantial situation. But I have been on the record talking about Trevor since he was at Jennings. Personally, I thought that Trevor had a whole different build and game than his older brother. And I think that he will have a better success if he finds the right fit in the NFL. Trevor was always tougher running, between the tackles and playing through contact. He just has he's short and stout and plays low to the ground and has that breakaway speed. And he's always been a fantastic pass catcher, which, in the NFL, you need the more skills, the better. And coming off of his time at Georgia, and also, with Billy Napier in Florida, he learned how to pass protect. So I think with that all in the bag, I think he's got a chance to, not to say that Travis can't still have a great, second half of his run, but I think that Trev can find the right fit and be a part of a rotation. And, if you land in the right spot, with a contender, get some significant carries.
Let's kind of wrap up on this because we just went into fully rambling, kind of shouting out every Louisiana guy that could kind of pop to mind. But we talked so much about the Jets at the beginning of this. You obviously have an affinity for the Saints through your years at, working out of New Orleans.
I married
the Saints aren't going to take.
So.
Yeah. So you've married into whatever the hell we're dealing with right now in terms of fandom, where we're trying to fight off not going back to that paper bag over our heads era of Saints right now. And I have a lot of confidence in Kellen.
Positioned.
Yeah. What a miserable time for your household on Sundays right now. But I do have a lot of faith in Kellen Moore and Doug Nussmeier and all those guys to turn this thing around in the years to come. If we can have some patience with it. I certainly don't expect the Saints to be taking one of these Louisiana guys in the 1st round unless everyone screws around and Will somehow falls to 9, in which case run to the podium with that one. But on day 2 and day 3, any of these other guys that we're talking about that you think you'd be particularly excited about if they were to fall in place and become a Saints, mid to late round draft pick, is there somebody that kind of pops to mind that you think would be exciting for you that, you and Miss Spiegelman could get it? I don't know if she uses your last name, but you and Allison could get really excited about together.
Yeah, I think, obviously as Cam gets older, I think it's important to restock across the defensive line. And I would love to see someone like Barron Sorrell go back home to New Orleans, be a great fit. Like I said, I think this is a guy that's going to play in the league for a long time. Will he be a superstar? Maybe, maybe not. But, is he someone that can be a 3 or 4 down defensive lineman in the NFL? Heck yeah. Mickey Loomis has loved drafting from Texas over the years, which wanted me to bring me to my next point, is people think that even though I'm not in the city anymore, this is what the buzz is, that they're going to tank this year to draft one Arch Manning for next year. So that plan, we'll know if that's real, if they draft Shedeur at 9 or not.
We'll get into more of this we can potentially, if no huge recruiting updates happen in the next week, we'll get into maybe who to watch next year. That could be 2026 Louisiana guys. Could be a topic we could get to, in which case that certainly becomes a conversation where Mr. Arch could be viewed as a Saint savior. I will say two things though, reaction to your quarterback take. I am pretty confident the Saints are not taking Shedeur at number 9, and I don't think they're going to end up taking Shedeur anywhere. I'm interested to see where he slides and who does ultimately make that move on him. And I don't know that we see Arch come out next year.
I definitely agree with that latter point.
I think they have the benefit in the Manning family of being really patient with some things and letting him continue to develop and enjoy his college opportunities there with Sark and company in Austin. All that said, the Saints would still have better quarterback options in that 26 draft, including, a guy that new OC knows pretty well, who wears some purple and gold in Baton Rouge. But we'll see how all that goes. We'll talk more about the potential of the 26 draft next week, but looking forward to seeing where all these 25 guys go. Again, hopefully we hit most of the guys, if not all the guys, who have a chance to have their names called on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. It's going to be really exciting to see where these guys land. I know Sam's excited to see where the Jets go at 7. I'm excited to see, along with him, the Saints at 9. But y'all enjoy this week and tune back in next week. Until next time, y'all be well.